Some people with intellectual disabilities in Renfrew are about to lose their jobs because of Ontario's new minimum wage law. They've been working at a local support group earning a few dollars an hour, but Bill 148 eliminates the exemption that allowed them to be paid below the minimum wage. Now their parents are lobbying political parties to bring it back. Matthew Kupfer is with me in the studio. He's been following the story. So Matthew, what's at the heart of this issue?
Lucy, parents believe this change means their children will go from earning a few dollars an hour to not having a job at all. I met with some of the people who are about to be out of a job at Community Living Renfrew. They do jobs like unloading and loading dishwashers and sorting the recycling for the support group. It was often occasional work, paying between $2 and $5 an hour. Their parents say they will lose those jobs because Community Living can't afford to pay their salaries if they're paid $14 an hour. So their parents are asking provincial politicians to bring back the exemption that allowed people with intellectual disabilities to work for less than the minimum wage. They say they want the exemption to apply strictly to people like their children who may not be hired otherwise for a job that pays the minimum wage.
My son is 37. He can't read or write. He is not worth $14 an hour, but he is worth something. To them, $2 or $20 means nothing. It's the whole point of them having the job. It was the point of him being able to tell his uncle or his friends that I have a job the same as you, I get a paycheck.
And Matthew, how is this then being received by advocates for people with disabilities?
Well, we also spoke to Chris Beesley. He has a son, a young man who has intellectual disabilities, and he's the CEO of Community Living Ontario. It's the provincial umbrella group for the agencies that help people with disabilities work and live in their communities. He says he agrees with the province that the minimum wage should apply to all workers, no matter what.
We talk about, people being devalued who have intellectual and developmental disabilities. This is literally devaluing them in terms of paying them pennies on the dollar. And so there just has to be a recognition of that. If it is a job, then it needs to be paid like a job.
But he says there should be more government support so individuals can get jobs in the community.
So back to these parents in Renfrew, they're organizing because of the election. How is the issue hitting the campaign trail?
Well, the parents took their concerns to PC leader Doug Ford at his rally in Renfrew 2 weeks ago. So we checked with the PC party about their position, and the PCs say the Liberals didn't do their homework before making changes to the law. The PCs plan to consult with families and agencies about restoring the minimum wage exemption. The Liberals say people with developmental disabilities deserve to be paid the new minimum wage. The party will work with agencies that want alternative programs. The NDP, meanwhile, says it will increase funding for community groups trying to find local employment opportunities.
Okay, Matthew, thanks very much for the issue.
Thank you.
And coming up a little bit later, we'll dig a little deeper into this debate. We'll talk to Keenan Wellar of LiveWorkPlay. It's a nonprofit organization that helps people with intellectual disabilities find jobs. The City of Ottawa's red light cameras are setting their sights on out-of-province motorists, including drivers from Quebec, who up until now were immune. A group of parents in Renfrew want provincial politicians to save their children's jobs by restoring an exemption in Ontario labour law that had allowed them to work for less than the minimum wage. The exemption enabled people with intellectual disabilities to be employed doing irregular work with community agencies for a few dollars an hour. The Liberals' Fair Workplaces, Better Jobs Act eliminated that exemption and also increased Ontario's minimum wage. Keenan Wellar is the co-leader of LiveWorkPlay. It's a nonprofit that helps people with intellectual disabilities find jobs in the community, and he disagrees with allowing people to work for less than the minimum wage. Welcome, Keenan.
Thank you.
So I think this is going to take some explanation.
Sure.
Why do you think it's important that Ontario end this exemption and not bring it back?
Right. So families started a movement probably around the 1950s in earnest to include people in their own communities. So get them out of institutions, into neighborhoods, into regular schools, not special schools. And so this is just another step in that movement towards inclusion in community. And so instead of agencies creating work-like situations and giving people a few dollars, It's directing resources and intentions to people being included in the community, whether it is in paid employment in the labor market or as volunteers or in recreation, whatever it might be, that is alongside other citizens and not hidden away in an agency environment.
Okay, so not some sort of parallel income stream, volunteer stream, that it's all the same.
Exactly. It's the same community. The people are different, the people are individual, and they need different supports. Just like a person with a physical disability needs supports to participate in a workplace, people with intellectual disabilities also need particular supports, and often particular help with employers who may not be familiar with the population because we have been hiding them away. And so they don't know about autism or Down syndrome. And so that's what most agencies like ours are doing now. It's focusing on actually helping employers who are actually very forthcoming in wanting to include people, but they've never done it and they need help.
So, but one of the things that strikes me about this story is that we heard from two parents this morning on our newscast that say these jobs mean so much to their sons who have intellectual disabilities. As of May 31st, they will be let go from their jobs because their employers cannot pay the full minimum wage. I mean, what do you say to that?
Well, there's been a huge error, and I was explaining this morning, I was quite heartbroken. I met them, and this is very sad, and it's simply unfair that the news has come to them in this way. So when I look back at our own agency, we had some programs like that in the 2000s, and we learned from some family members up in Pembroke, actually, how they had changed their agency, so they were not doing this anymore. And when we had the conversation with our families and individuals, we set a timetable of 2 years. And it wasn't 2 years and then we close, it's 2 years and let's see where we are in terms of each person's life. And we didn't close the program, everyone had left within 2 years because we were successful. And so that kind of process is what would be fair, not just saying you have a few days and it's over.
Okay, so more lead-up time to make other arrangements, it sounds like. But one of the things the mother said this morning was her son, she said, is not worth $14 an hour. Maybe he's worth $5, but the experience is invaluable to him, and it's not about the money ultimately, but he's no longer going to be working. So, I mean, how do you respond to that? Because the mothers are saying, it's okay, don't pay him minimum wage.
Yes. I guess two things on that. One is some people that I had made the assumption that sounded very similar. This person would not succeed in a $14 an hour job. Turned out I was wrong because someone found an employer who thought differently. And so I have learned from that. I'm not the employer. I shouldn't make that judgment. Maybe there is someone out there and we just haven't found them yet. But secondly, there's lots of people in society that are not in the labor force but make contributions and have a good life. So we can also look at people that are experiencing barriers to paid work. What else goes on? What do people do when they don't work? So there's volunteerism, there's recreation, there's clubs, there's courses, there's classes, and self-improvement and various opportunities. So I think it's the whole picture. It's not 40 hours a week in the labor market or nothing. It's what is going on in this person's life. What do they like about those experiences they're having at the agency, and what exists in the community that could maybe give them some of what they would enjoy? Okay.
Now, as I understand it, Keenan, you once worked for an agency that did this exact thing before the thinking shifted to where we are today, where you would try to place individuals and they would receive pay less than the minimum wage. Were you able to find all of these folks placements, work?
Right, so that was about 15 years ago, so I can't promise I know exactly what's happened with all of them, but at the time, all of them were in probably about 80% had some sort of paid employment, and there were some that did not want paid work, so we supported them into volunteerism. Some went into post-secondary, which is starting to open up. Another sort of barrier that's been closed to this population is post-secondary education, so that's also opening, which is great. But it's about building a balanced life. I'd say right now our success rate with employment is about 80%. So that's getting close. You know, we're moving closer and closer to the regular population. 50 used to be a good number. Now we're at 80. So it's all progress.
So the bottom line, though, is for these families in Renfrew, May 31st, their son's work is done. You know, while this all gets sorted out. So, and the mothers say that they want this exemption. What do you say to those families?
I think it would be a really good, it's not my business, but it would be a really good time to bring in some outside help to this agency and to the families. That's what we did. When we realized what we were doing was probably not the best outcome, We didn't just close something or change it. We brought in people who'd done it, including family members, mothers that spoke to mothers, and that is really how we started the process. And I'm seeing a situation, I love those two moms, I love their passion. No one can question how much they care, and not just about their own sons, but about others. But I think the energy, it could be used a bit differently, but it might take some outside help, because I'm not sure that locally right now they've quite got it, the possibilities figured out. And I think Renfrew is full of possibilities. I know it's small, but they can do it.
All right. Thanks a lot for coming in, Keenan.
My pleasure.